Welcome to our Canada Day French Horn special of Get to Know the HPO. My name is Abigail Richardson-Schulte, and I'm composer in residence with the HPO. Well, yes, today is Canada Day. Happy Canada Day. And we will be hearing a really unique version of O Canada right at the end of today's show. So stay tuned to that. Now, today I'm really delighted to have three people that are very special to the HPO and are all French horn players, as you may have gathered. So first of all, we have Jessie Brooks, who is our HPO Principal Horn. Hi, Jessie. We have Jamie Sommerville, who is Principal Horn with the Boston Symphony Orchestra, and as most of you will know, is former music director of the HPO. Hi, Jamie. And we have Neil Spaulding, who plays second horn with the HPO, and he's also operations and personnel manager. So it's great to have you here. Now, all three of you are good friends and colleagues. How do you know each other?
Well, I guess we should start. I don't know, what's our origin story? We met at an audition for the Toronto Symphony Youth Orchestra, and that was in 1921. And
79.
Neil won, I lost, and then there's been like ups and downs ever since. But actually, we've stayed close most of that time. We shared a house for a number of years. We've been sharing a house for the last few months and haven't strangled each other yet. So yeah, good friends.
Yeah, great. And then how do you know Jessie?
Well, I think, Jessie, correct me if I'm wrong, we met at National Music Camp, and you were a student and I was teaching there, and that was 89 or 90, I think.
Yeah, around 89 or 90.
And you were in grade 8, and you did not have a horn teacher yet, and then you asked for horn lessons, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So Neil was my teacher, and then Neil got me ready for, when I was graduating high school, Neil got me ready to audition for university and encouraged me to go to McGill to study with Jamie. So that's how I know Jamie.
There we go. Right. Excellent. Excellent. Now that actually answers one of our pre-submitted questions, which was from Megan Norse, who works in marketing at the HPO. And first of all, Jessie, she has a comment for you. She says, your solo during Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony in January was truly magical to hear live in the concert hall. And she asks, can you reflect on your post-secondary music education journey? How did you decide which bachelor's and master's programs you wanted to attend? So there we go. I guess Neil really helped decide where you should go for to McGill. What about after that?
Well, after McGill, I actually ended up going to University of Toronto for a year. It was actually my 4th year of my undergrad. And this was after Jamie had left to go to Boston. And I studied with Eugene Rittich, who was both Jamie and Neil's teacher way back. So it all sort of comes full circle.
Yeah. So he's like the horn grandfather then of you. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say I studied for 1 year with him. And then he encouraged me to do a master's degree. And I went to the University of Illinois and did that.
I see. Okay. And I understand the picture behind you has something to do with Eugene Rittich?
Yes, this photograph, you have a close-up of it. So that is a photograph. That was a graduation gift from my parents for graduating from my undergrad. And it's a photograph that Eugene Rittich took in 1996, and it's called Found Abstract. And I love having this photograph in my house. It's really special to me. It reminds me of, he told me about this picture because at first glance it looks kind of like a painting, like an abstract painting. But what he told me about this photo is that it's actually a really, really close up photograph of the side of a car in a junkyard. and you can kind of see the paint peeling away and the other colors of paint coming out from underneath. And it's just, I just find it so beautiful that he found this beauty in the discarded.
Yeah, well put. That is really beautiful.
Yeah. Do Jamie or Neil want to say anything about studying with Eugene Rittich?
Yeah, although, I mean, when you were talking about the photograph, it made me think of, I own a couple of his photos as well. And I remember towards the end of his life going through the collection of prints that he had. He had a whole series that he shot in that same junkyard where yours came from. And they're all beautiful, and they all have that thing that I loved about his photographic work, and also something that I love in the arts in general, like things that are abstract and you can look at it as just a composition of colors and textures, but then there's a shift and you see that it's a real object. It's not just something fantastical or internal or made up. So I always love that about his creative work. And as a horn teacher, I mean, I feel immensely fortunate to have studied with him. I think I had a number of great teachers, but most of us have, whatever our fields, most of us have one or two mentors, people who really taught, took us to the level that we could achieve. And he was definitely that for me, both from the information he imparted and just his character and his nature, the way he treated other people, the way he dealt with rehearsal and preparation. I learned a ton from him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Neil?
Yeah, for me, I like Jessie. I studied with him privately for only 1 year. Prior to that, I studied with Wayne Jeffrey, which was a great experience. But I'll tell you that he was a huge influence on me because he was also the Toronto Symphony Youth Orchestra wind and brass coach. And I, all of my colleagues who went on to professional careers from that organization, from the Toronto Symphony Youth Orchestra, we still, to this day, when we're talking, we'll talk about how we basically learned everything we know about playing in an orchestra from Eugene Rittich. Mm-hmm. He was such a stickler for detail and such an artist that it's just this huge lifelong influence.
Right, and it sounds like he would have taught you how to be good teachers and good mentors as well. So for Jamie and Neil, go ahead.
I don't want to go on only one topic, but it just made me think of a moment with Eugene. It was one of my very first lessons. I can't remember if we mentioned that he was principal horn of the Toronto Symphony for many years, from the mid-50s into the early 90s. But there's this Zen saying that when you're ready to learn, the teacher that you need will appear, and that was very much the case with me. And in fact, my second or third lesson with him, I was being kind of a hot shot, and I was just playing some Mozart concerto too fast, and he sort of stopped me, and he paused for a minute, and he said, "Just listen." And you can say that, and it can sound a little glib, but sometimes you just need to hear, it's just like that drop of water in the right place. You need that word at that time, and that, I mean, it really literally just opened up a world to me when he said that one word. So almost, yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear where your musical lineage comes from here. That's great to hear. So Neil and Jamie, you appeared at the right time in Jessie's life, obviously, as teachers. Can you talk about what it means, what the responsibility is when you have a really talented student like Jessie? Do you have to try to, of course, help her find her way musically, but do you actually have some obligation to help with starting with career, for example?
Yeah, you do. If someone is really serious about the instrument and music, and they have a burning desire to do that, you you have to honor that, and I think you have to. You also what you said, Abby, about being Eugene Rittich being an example. I think you have to then try as much as you can to be an example to them about in every way, because you know that this is a very tough, unforgiving profession, and you want to imbue them with as much of your technical and musical knowledge that you might not have, but that you might have. But you also really want to make sure that that you model the right attitudes towards the work itself and towards the people that you're working with, and I guess work at let them know as much as you can why you're doing it yourself, and so they think about why very carefully about why they're doing it. But bottom line, on a much lighter but still as true note, you don't want to screw them up. I mean, you can really screw up a student if you teach them the wrong things in the wrong order. If you give them your bad habits rather than the good habits that you have. That's Jamie.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I mean, a big part of working with, especially with talented students, learning to be a good teacher, a big part of it is knowing just how much to stay out of the way. I mean, they have to walk their path, and you can't walk it for them. And if they're doing a good job, you just kind of if they start to brush the leaves on one side, just kind of give them a nudge. But I mean, Jessie's an excellent example. I mean, she was, I didn't screw her up, so I'm quite proud of that.
Yeah. Now, Jessie, I'm quite interested to hear what you've been doing. I hear you've been doing some backyard playing with a neighbor at this time.
Yes. So, without going into too much detail about the whole pandemic, it has been quite a roller coaster for me. When things shut down in March, I first thought, this can't last for very long, so I'm gonna play a lot, and I actually really enjoyed having the time to just do whatever I wanted to play, and dig out some solos. And I actually started this sounds kind of funny, but the digital concert hall through the Berlin Phil was free for everybody, so I went on there and I listened to all the Berlin concerts and played along with, got parts from the internet and played along with all these different symphonies, and I was having so much fun. But then as the weeks wore on, I kind of got a little, disillusioned, and like many of us in the industry, just this profound grief at, the loss of our industry. And I basically stopped playing for a few weeks. And then my neighbor, who is actually a member of the Toronto Symphony, his name's Jim Sprague. He plays trumpet in the Toronto Symphony. He called me up and said, we have a lot of healthcare workers in our neighborhood, and wouldn't it be nice to salute them and play something for them to thank them for all their hard work during this time. And I thought that's a great idea. So we, every Sunday, I guess starting, end of March, beginning of April, we would play at noon. Every Sunday we'd do a social distance rehearsal in his garage. And then we'd go out and play a few tunes. Oh yeah, there we are on the corner, playing some tunes for our neighbors to thank them. There we are again. That's me in my running gear, because I just run a 10K, the Yonge Street 10K. Ran back and played some solos for the neighbors, some duets. So I have a piece that he wasn't available. I think it was last weekend. He was busy, so I went and played a solo for the neighbors. So I was going to play what I played for them.
That'd be great.
Is that all right?
Yes,
Okay.
please do.
I hope the levels are okay. Okay, can you see me? Yeah, there we go.
Ah. Thank you, Jessie. What did you play?
That was Josh Groban's "You Raise Me Up."
All right, that's great. Thank you for that. Now, Jamie, you are Principal Horn of the Boston Symphony Orchestra and live in Boston. So why are you here? Was it a clear choice to come back to Canada?
It didn't start out that way. I mean, this has been this kind of slow motion cataclysm for all of us. And it kind of caught up to me in the middle of March. I was in Toronto visiting family and taking care of some family business. And it was right when all the flights were starting to shut down. And I was meant to fly back to Boston, but the airports just looked like the worst place in the world to be at that moment. So I stuck around, and a few extra days turned into a few extra weeks. And as you know, like the Boston Symphony, like every other orchestra, things have just shut down. Oh, there I am. That's what I've been doing ever since, except for that horrible month of April when it seemed like it was snowing every single day. Yeah, so there hasn't been a reason for me to be back particularly, because I've just go back to sit in my condo by myself, and Neil would sit here in his house by himself, and we have work, we're teaching, and Neil has administrative work to do and so forth, but it's all remote, obviously. So I could be anywhere, and I like it here. Things are certainly looking better here than in most parts of the US in almost every way. So I'll be back eventually, but it's been great. It's been nice to kind of get reacquainted.
Yeah, it's been cool.
And last week, I know you went biking with Mike Fedician, right? Last week we had Mike Fedician, our HPO principal trumpet player, on this series. And he played a video of the Canadian National Brass Project, and you were conducting in the living room. So that was nice. We'll post a link to that so that people can watch it. But I have a question for you. What is it like to virtual conduct when you have no musicians in front of you?
Yeah, well, I should be honest. I mean, it's pretty artificial. I mean, the way... There isn't really a practical way to conduct online in the same way that you do live, because the same problems that exist with playing chamber music. I mean, there's a lag no matter how good your connections are. So you can't really play together and you can't really follow. So, I mean, really what we did was I had a click track and I conducted the piece based on my memory of it. And then the players recorded it based on their sheet music. And, I don't know, maybe they looked up, maybe they didn't. But it's like so much else in this period, it's like we do our best with the resources that we have. And it was definitely a great project and very, very enjoyable in a lot of ways. But it's, the real thing is a lot better.
Yeah. Fair enough. I have one more question for you, Jamie, right now. And that is, you mentioned that people always ask you about the difference between conducting and performing and the different mindset, I suppose, that's required. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. It is very interesting. And as a musician, I'm fortunate to be able to have those two facets to indulge, I guess, and to be on stage in those two very different roles. I mean, the best kind of metaphor for it, I guess, that I can think of is that when you study a piece of music as a horn player, when you learn a horn part, so if you're learning let's say Tchaikovsky Fifth Symphony, you are taking this like bright flashlight to, it's like you're in a dark room and you take this bright flashlight and you go exactly to the spot that you have to study. So you, of course, what's going on around you and you interact with the other musicians. But in terms of the mental focus in performance, it's very much, on what you're producing and how that interacts. When you conduct, you really are, rather than taking that flashlight into the shed, you're like turning the lights on and keeping an eye on everything. So you have to, in your preparation, you have to study everything about the piece. You have to know every note of the score. You have to know the cultural context. You have to know about the composer and his associates and his influences. And then in rehearsal, of course, you have to it's not like you are the boss exactly, but you have to keep things moving at the right pace and make sure that everything gets rehearsed that needs to be rehearsed. And then in concert, kind of like I was saying about teaching, you have to know when you have to just stay out of the way, when things need a little nudge or people need a little guidance. And then when they don't try and control everything and just let the musicians do what they do best. Because, of course, with an orchestra like the HPO, there are just so many talented people up there who all can play their instruments perfectly well with any input from me. So especially once you're in the concert, you just, as much as possible, stay out of the way and let it happen.
I see. Yeah, interesting. Now, Neil and Jessie, you work together quite a lot, of course, on stage. But I'm wondering about some of the things you do together off stage. Can you talk a little about that and maybe tell us about Memory Cafe?
Sure. Do you want to start, Neil?
No, you go, Jessie.
Okay. Well, Neil and I have played a number of shows in the Hamilton community. So we do these horn duos, and what we often do is we tend to bring, we do like a little horn demo, it's like a short little history of the horn. And then we often play some duets together, Mozart duets. And then we'll play, a few pop tune duets. And it's for people who have like cognitive deficiencies or people with early onset Alzheimer's. And it's really amazing to see how they just light up when we play some of those songs that they recognize. It's really great to see that. Do you want to add anything, Neil?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, Abby, you and I talked about this on my first appearance on these programs. But just to say again, I think I never knew that when I was studying the horn and studying all the sort of great works of the orchestral literature, that my favorite thing about any orchestra that I joined would be how they cultivated a connection to the community. I didn't think that would be my passion. And I certainly still love being on the stage at First Ontario Concert Hall and doing all the wonderful things we do. But I'm so glad to be part of an organization that really genuinely cares about the community, and to, like Jessie said, to go in and do these library shows for people who really need it, who wouldn't otherwise get to see concerts, where we can do with people who have Alzheimer's or dementia or head injuries, whatever it would be, to do sing-alongs with them, because that's what Jessie and I do. We bring song sheets, and they sing along, because with people who have dementia, particularly, part of the brain that still works very well for some reason for most people who have dementia is the area of the brain that governs music. And so they might not be able to remember what anyone said to them 2 minutes ago, but they will remember a familiar tune from their childhood. And for them to feel that confidence in that 2 or 3 minutes that they're singing with us, because they know the words, they know the tune, they can really join in. Because a person who has dementia often can't even join in a conversation, because conversation requires working memory. For me, that's honestly, it's quite thrilling to do those. And sorry, just one more thing.
Go ahead.
With Jessie is fantastic, because she is such a good friend, such a good colleague, and also such exactly the right kind of person to be doing this kind of work, because Jessie is also a terribly kind and empathetic person. And anyway, it's just thrilling.
That's wonderful. That's great, Neil.
I have a little thing.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, this is something that these kinds of projects are the sorts of things that everyone in the HPO family should be incredibly proud of. And I think it's important that the Hamilton community and the HPO community realize how amazing it is, actually. I mean, every orchestra in North America, probably in the world, pays lip service to community service and outreach and education. And, they all do some, but having been a part of the HPO world for a few years, and also a lot of other orchestras, it's so clear how that part of the HPO's mission is just like right in the DNA, like it has been for decades and decades, at least back to the 70s. And it's always really been absolutely basic to the HPO. And I think the leadership that's been there for the last 10, 15 years have done a great job of maintaining that. And it's just amazing and pretty unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. It's true. We are really kind of everywhere. Go ahead, Jessie.
At our Horn Duo shows and at some of the other outreach stuff I do with the brass quintet, we have a very, very loyal friend and patron who comes to almost every show. And he brings people with mobility issues, and he's often at our shows, and he always has his sketchbook with him.
Yep.
And the last show we did, the last Horn Duo show Neil and I did was in February, and I wanted to show you this picture that he drew. His name is Daryl, and he drew a picture of me. There we go.
Great.
Yeah, that's great.
Horn Duo show, and I just love this. And he gave it to me after the show, and I just really cherish it. I think it's a really sweet thing, and we love seeing him at our shows.
Absolutely. He's often actually watching this series. I think he isn't today. His name's Daryl Dockstader, and he often asks questions in advance. So yeah, just so engaged. We love Daryl for sure.
Why didn't he draw a picture of you, Neil?
He drew a picture of me. He always did. He did.
Yeah. Yeah, I have many of them. They're great. He comes to so many different events. So just one question about your memory cafe then. So you're playing pop tunes, I assume. Yeah. How do pop tunes sound on the horn? And Jessie, maybe this is a segue for you. Can we have a name that tune game from you?
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
You know, when I was younger, before I studied with Neil, I thought I was going to be a rock star. You know, like every other 13-year-old, learning a new instrument.
Rock star, Jessie.
It's like I just thought I was going to be so cool. And so I would listen to songs, and then I would pick out horn solos, and I would listen to them a million times and write them all out. And then anyway, so I have 3 tunes that I'm going to play, and let's see if the audience can figure them out.
Yeah. So if those of you that are watching, when you have a guess, just write it up.
All right. That's the hardest one.
Any guesses?
I am totally racking my brain. Like,
this is funny too, because on the classical version that Mary J did, our second trumpet player a few weeks ago, Neil won it all. He won the day. He knew all of those excerpts, but maybe not the pop tunes, hey?
Oh, God, I recognize that. I just can't place it.
Okay, we'll give 5 seconds, then we'll reveal it. 5. Oh, Martin Little says The Who.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what? I got to say something about Martin Little just for a second, because The Who, Tommy, that's what Martin says. Martin Little and I went to public school together, and we're Facebook friends. And hi, Martin.
All right, that's great. Matthew Brooks guessed the Beatles. No, it was The Who. Yeah. Excellent. Next one.
Next one?
Yep.
Awesome.
And do we have any guesses?
I know there's controversy about that. What instrument that's supposed to be, but I think
No! Don't get me started. It's a horn.
it's a horn.
Okay, do we have any guesses? Neil Young, Kenneth Ross says.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right.
Ken. Hey, Ken.
Okay, Ken, do you know? Oh, Look at Mother Nature.
No.
I don't believe so.
That's
No.
not the title.
Any other guesses for a title? No? All right, Jessie, what was it?
It was After the Gold Rush.
After the Gold Rush. Okay, great. Well, we got pretty close there with Neil Young. And you have one more for us?
Yep. Everyone should get that one.
I'm stumped.
Okay. You're stumped, Neil?
I'm stumped.
Oh,
I think it's a Stones tune, isn't it?
it's a Stones tune.
Yeah. I'm forgetting the title though.
Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2,
Come on,
1. What was it, Jessie?
You can't always get what you want.
Right.
Ah, you got us. All right, so we got pretty close there. We got the groups anyway, for the most part. That's great. Thanks for doing that. That's a lot of fun. Now, I was delighted that the three of you got together and recorded a performance for today. So can you set that up for us, and then we'll watch that video?
Would you like me to say something?
Sure.
So we got together in my backyard and we had a really fun time recording a couple of Anton Reicha horn trios. And it was especially fun for me because I hadn't played with other people in so many months. Actually, the first thing that I did back, since everything shut down, the first time I played with anyone was with the brass quintet last week when we recorded this thing that's going to be, I think you'll mention it later, aired tonight on CHCH for Canada Day. But then playing with Neil and Jamie in my backyard was the very second thing I ever did with other people, and it was so much fun. We recorded 2 pieces by Anton Reicha, who was a composer, a Czech-born composer, a colleague or a contemporary of Beethoven. And I guess he was a teacher of Liszt and Berlioz and Franck. And he wrote a ton of music, but he didn't want any of his music published, apparently, is what I read. And so none of his music is really that well known. But he was most famous for writing a lot of wind quintets. But this survived and this was published, and this is Anton Reicha. You guys want to add anything to that?
Sure, yeah. He more or less invented the woodwind quintet. So anyone who's ever played woodwind quintets has played Anton Reicha. He wrote a ton of them. And of course, that's, for woodwind players, that's arguably the most important chamber music combination. So that's a big contribution to musical history. But I actually kind of wanted to chime in on something that Jessie said about finally performing or at least playing with other people. Because Neil and I had a similar experience just a few days before that, actually. And it was completely impromptu. We were sitting around the house on a Friday afternoon, and this street party kind of broke out in front of his house. And so we were out there chatting with some neighbors very responsibly. And his next door neighbor to one side, they have 2 little daughters, one of whom plays the violin. She's about 8 years old. And at one point I sort of sensed this presence, and I turned, and this girl was staring at me from 2 meters away and said, "I want you to play your French horns." So we kind of looked at each other, we're like, okay. Yeah. So we dragged our horns out in the stand. We played some Mozart duets. I will go ahead and say we were both a little nervous, actually, even though
I was totally nervous.
It was a very receptive audience. But the thing was exactly as Jessie said, just after so long, just to kind of sit there and hear yourself and interact with another musician and see the actual faces of live human beings paying attention. I mean, it just, it's like you're missing this vitamin that you didn't know you were missing until you got it, and all of a sudden you felt 100 times better. So it was a special thing.
Yeah, it was super cool. And
it's fantastic.
That little girl says that this week she's going to play the violin for all of the neighbors. So apparently we inspired her. Briefly.
So we're going to watch these videos now. There are 2 trios. by Reicha. So we'll play the videos back to back. And for those of you watching, there's a chance to ask questions. So if you have questions and comments, just put them up as we go. All right, so let's see these pieces by your backyard horn trio. Wow, thank you. That was great. You know, I've never actually heard a trio with 3 horns in it before. And I don't know the music of Reicha well. But it is really interesting to think that he was born at the same time as Beethoven, the same year, 1770. They were educated by the same teachers. So it's a really interesting parallel. We had some really nice comments for you here. Aaron Brooks sounding great. Justin Bush, hi from Vancouver. You all sound great. David Pell, our principal trombone, writes, nice job, gang. I think Jamie passes the audition to join the formidable HPO section. Oh, we have a question here from Larry Paikin, who we all know well. He's one of our great HPO supporters, been so involved in the organization for decades. Writes, how did you record it so cleanly? I see no wires, and the branches are moving in the background.
Well, we have to credit the inevitable Mike Fedician for this. Mike has many talents, and one of them is as a videographer. So Mike did it, and I mean, the one technical detail I can share is that he had one microphone over the camera, a reasonable distance away, and we found a very old, clean, but a very old athletic sock somewhere in the backyard or in Jessie's house, and that went over the microphone, and that got rid of the wind noise.
Ah, okay, a good tip. All right, a few more comments for you here. Elaine Atkins, thank you, bravo. Pat Dickinson, fabulous. What a treat this has been. Thank you so much. Michelle Fawcett says beautiful. Gail Woodson, bravo from Florida. Thanks everyone for your comments. That's great. And remember, you can ask a question. There's still just enough time if you have a question. We do have a couple that were submitted in advance. And Jamie, they are for you. You might remember Heather Beale, who is a board member of the HPO and has been involved with us for some time. She asks an interesting question. Anything you would have liked to have accomplished with the HPO but didn't?
You know, I that doesn't feel like a question that has a yes or no answer, in the sense that I think, as I sort of referred to earlier, there was this, the HPO has a real identity. You know, there are a lot of regional orchestras in Canada, but they don't all have the same kind of identity that the HPO does, especially as concerns, as I was saying, you know, community engagement and presence in the city. And there is a tradition of excellence, too, at the HPO that goes back also a long way. I mean, we think, for example, of the history of the Canadian Brass and a few other ensembles that had their starts at the HPO. A lot of great musicians who passed through. over the years. So, you know, a music director is always to some extent kind of a curator of what's there, and, you know, hopefully you can see somewhere an opportunity for the orchestra, maybe whether that's to bring the quality up or the opportunities up or to bring new repertoire to the audiences. And I think we did a lot of that. But in large part, I think we just kind of got a few projects going that Gemma has really kind of taken on and taken to the next level. So by a lot of measures, the HPO is doing much more exciting stuff now than we were when I was there. A lot of the same kinds of things, but you know, she's just done a great job of expanding them and finding new audiences, finding new musical ideas and opportunities.
Mm-hmm. And that actually leads into another question for you. This was asked by Megan Norse, who is one of our team members in marketing. And she asks, you were the HPO's music director for quite a few years. Do you remember if you shared any advice with your successor, Gemma New?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I said, I actually, yes. One thing I said is the first thing you should do is fire Neil Spaulding. And then once you fired him, then he'll come back to work anyway, and then fire him again. So he's been fired, I don't know, dozens of times.
I don't know how many times.
Yeah. And he keeps on coming back with new positions, you know? He used to be personnel manager, now he's operations manager. So
Exactly.
I'm like a weed.
No, but I mean, more seriously, I think we had a few meetings by phone and in person, and I talked to her about what I knew about the board and about the city and about the musicians, and she had a few questions about all kinds of details. So you know, I think I helped kind of fill her in on some of that background. But you know, as you know, she's a great musician and she's an inspired director, and you know, I mean, she didn't need my advice, so she's done really great.
She has done really great. Yeah. So now I think orchestras everywhere, of course, are having to take a deep look at what they do and how inclusive they are. And Jamie, you had mentioned something earlier about some reading about a black horn player. Has this? Can you give us a little bit of an idea about that? How traditionally have black horn players fared in the orchestral world?
Well, so it's a long story actually that goes back at least to the days when horn players were part of the hunting retinue of French nobles, and it was sort of a fashionable thing to have African horn players. So we're talking back 16th century. And as you can imagine, people of African descent then in Europe had a lot of very similar challenges and tragedies that have existed up till this day. And there are some really amazing stories about some of those players over the years, in the US in the 18th century, in Canada, there were a number of players who either were freed in the US and made their way up to Canada and made careers here, or just escaped. But the story that you're referring to that I became aware of was the story of a guy named Robert Northern who died just a few weeks ago at 86. And his story, I think you're going to maybe post the link to a long interview that he did a couple of years ago. But it's the most amazing story. I mean, he was born in the American South. His father was, when Robert was young, his father was challenged by a Klansman, and his father beat the guy up, and then they had to run to the north to save their lives. He made his career beginning in New York City, but he's like, I mean, if you know the movie Zelig, the Woody Allen movie about the guy who just appears everywhere in history, and that's kind of Robert Northern. I mean, he was the first black player in the Met Orchestra. He did a lot of freelancing in New York. He played with all the jazz greats of the time, with Gil Evans, Thelonious Monk, Miles Davis, Max Roach. And he also studied in Vienna with Gottfried von Freiberg, who was the principal horn Philharmonic for many years, first player of the Strauss Second Horn Concerto. He had a gig in Wiesbaden for a while, and he taught at a couple of Ivy League schools. And it's an amazing biography, but also because he talks a lot about, of course, the racism that he had to endure. And I think Canadians to some extent, and also as a resident of the American Northeast, we can be a little smug about these things. But the kind of abuse and prejudice that he had to deal with was just terrifying. And this is the 1950s and 60s. I mean, literally sitting in the locker room at the Met and having his colleagues come by and kick him in between rehearsals. A lot of things like that. So it was real, of course, I think like a lot of us now, this has been much more in my consciousness, and I'm trying to find out more and more about it. And so it was a fascinating story, and a terrible story in many ways, but also a triumphant one, because he lived a great life. He had a lot of successes, made a couple of albums of some of the craziest jazz music you've ever heard in your life under the name Brother Ah. But it's a really great read, and I think it's both, sobering and kind of triumphant at the same time.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. We've posted some links for some follow-up reading. Yeah, I mean, of course, after this, our scene will change and is already trying to figure out, how to be more inclusive with programming and making sure that we have diverse performers as well. So this is really important to talk about, especially on Canada Day. Now we're just about finished. So we had a few more comments for you here. And just one question, actually, from Michelle Fawcett. Is anyone offering online Zoom feedback lessons? Need to keep the chops challenged. I think a lot of musicians have switched to online teaching. Yeah, so if any of you do online teaching, maybe we'll get in touch offline here.
Sure.
Yeah, great.
Can I say one more thing?
Please.
I saw a question from Ken McDonald asking if Neil is the best second horn player, is a great second horn player, or the best second horn player. And I have to answer the question because I think Neil is the best second horn player. I love working with Neil in the HPO, and it's really fun playing in an ensemble like the HPO. When you, like Jamie said, it's full of really talented players, and I really, really miss playing with all my colleagues on stage, and I really look forward to the time when we can all get together and play again, because it just opens my heart when I hear the talent around me playing and makes me want to connect with them musically. So
right back at you, Jessie. Right back.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an honor to play with you.
Oh, you two are so cute.
True. And this guy too.
Now, just for those of you who didn't catch our very first Facebook Live series, it was with Neil Spaulding, and Neil was fantastic. So we'll post a link to Neil's session. If you didn't catch it before, I advise you to check it out. And Neil is also a fantastic crooner, so there's quite a surprise on that video. Now, it is time to say goodbye, and since it is Canada Day, we are going to have a very special 3-horn performance of "O Canada." Yay! Oh, and some flags, that's great. Now, this arrangement was made by Maria D'Ambrosio, and I believe Maria's mother is actually on here as well watching, and posted at the beginning of the feed that she's ready and excited to see this. So that's great. Do you have anything to tell us about your "O Canada" video, or should we just watch it?
Well, I do want another shout out to Maria. She's a master's student at New England Conservatory where I teach, and she would, I kind of called her, was it Saturday night, and said, do you think she's a great arranger? So I said, you think you could arrange "O Canada" for 3 horns? We have to do it like tomorrow. She's like, well, would 10 a.m. be okay?
Wow.
It's like, yes, that would be fine.
I bet she stayed up all night. Wow.
You might have, yeah.
That's great. Well, let's watch this.
It's too bad we can't listen to it. We listen to it.
We listen to it all. Very interesting.
Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect. What a great way to end, and very nice arrangement, Maria, with some interesting harmonies in there too. That's just great.
We might have improvised a couple of those by
Yeah, well, this has been a lot of fun. So it's time to say goodbye here, but I hope that all of you at home will watch tonight's broadcast on CHCH at 7, which features our HPO Brass Quintet, including Jessie, playing Oscar Peterson's Hymn to Freedom. So this is part of the City of Hamilton's virtual Canada Day celebration, and we're really, really pleased to be part of that. Now, we do have some comments for you, a lot of applause here, and great job, awesome playing and arrangement. Elspeth Thompson says, thanks for this, guys. So really a lot of fun on here today. And Heather Beal, thanks, horns, and happy Canada Day. All right, so for those of you watching at home, please join us next week, same time, Wednesday at noon. And thank you so much to our wonderful horn players today, Jessie, Jamie, and Neil. This has been a lot of fun and so great to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Abby.
All right, goodbye.
Bye.